back to Sovereign Actual. This week, as promised, again, I am showcasing an iconic stealth game that isn't Metal Gear Solid or Assassin's Creed. In 2002, Ubisoft released the first Splinter Cell, a stealth-based game that made use of Unreal technology to promote the whole stay in the shadows gameplay. I love this game franchise with a passion, and about once a month I check to see if any progress has been made on a new installment. I even reread the novels roughly once a year. I couldn't even begin to tell you how many hours I spent over the last 18 years playing the games or reading the books. Very likely too many hours to count. Splinter Cell was well received by the community and became one of Ubisoft's flagship franchises. According to Wikipedia, this game sold over 31 million copies, and I consider that pretty dang impressive. Again, I visited GameSpot, not a sponsor, to look at reviews and ratings. Overall, Splinter Cell received an 8.6. The worst review on GameSpot gave it a score of 4. But the review was a bit of a farce. To quote the reviewer, "Overall the quality wasn't that bad, but I don't like stealth games all that much. I'd rather play a first-person shooter." This statement isn't against the game itself, it's against the genre. If you don't like stealth games, why play them? In conclusion, this game is better off left alone. It is an asinine statement from a reviewer that claims to not like the genre of stealth-based games. For actual fans of stealth, I'd say this game is a must-play. Now on to the highest rated review, with a score of 10 for the GameCube version, which I didn't even know existed. The reviewer doted on the game, saying he never lost interest for 1 minute and that it's the hardest game he's ever played. I'll go over the difficulty later, but I do imagine some of his issues with difficulty could have come from the absurd GameCube controller. Now let's get into the meat of it, starting with game design. For the purpose of this video, I did mod the game. What I did was to make it so it would run at widescreen 1080p, and I added the HD textures from the PS3 version of the game. I did this for multiple reasons. One, being able to gain legible text for the purpose of this video, and one being that the letterbox 720p resolution would have looked like absolute crud. I made no changes to the game beyond these textures and resolution changes. There are two very important game design factors in this game, which I'm referring to here as the sound threshold and the light threshold. I'll go into the sound threshold later, but here is the information on the light threshold. On the HUD is a small bar that goes from gray to yellowish. This bar changes depending on how much light is hitting Sam. The darker the better. Guards can walk right past you and not notice you. The lighter is bad, as he's completely visible. Finding the balance here is key to Sam's purpose, which is to remain undetected, usually. This is where shooting out the lights comes into play, though the sound of a light blowing out may attract guards if they are within range, and some guards carry flashlights, so beware of that. The world is small and linear. There are multiple paths you can take, such as out the window onto some scaffolding and in through another window, or up a pipe to traverse the ceiling, but in general you're probably going to take the same paths every single time. This was vastly expanded upon in the sequels, but this video isn't about those. On a larger scale, the world is, well, it's believable. You visit various areas around the world, mostly Europe and the Middle East, to infiltrate office buildings and military bases and the like. There are 4 characters of significance in this game, and really the only ones that matter. Sam Fisher. This stoic badass is Third Echelon's top agent, and is voiced by the iconic Michael Ironside. He also has more than the stereotypical one-liners, though those are delivered with a personality that makes the character of Sam Fisher seem almost real. Anna Grimm's daughter is your source for any and all information on plot developments and target details. She lets you know, via radio, what kinds of defenses to expect. She is the exposition queen of this game. Redding plays a smaller role in the game, and he is the one that provides you with tech. such as your OPSAT and weapons. He also provides information on enemy tech and suggestions for bypassing and hacking stuff. Colonel Irving Lambert is the leader of 3rd Echelon, and he's the one who will constantly tell you the stakes of the mission and what happens if you mess up. He's also a good friend of Sam's, and they have a witty back and forth banter that's quite enjoyable. As for the graphics, well, come on, it was 2002, so let's be perfectly honest, the graphics are lame. Good at the time, but fairly lackluster in this day and age. As I already said, I added the PS3 HD textures to the game for this video, so what you're seeing is much better looking than when the game was fresh. And to be clear, this is the PC version of the game where such improvements can be accomplished. However, I left every other aspect of the game the same. Objects have the same low poly count they had in 2002. The HUD is extremely basic, and even with the HD texture mod, the textures are pixelated. Everything is angled and the seams between textures are very noticeable. Lighting is good in this game, probably because it plays such a massive role in the core of the gameplay mechanics. As for the general aesthetic, I'll let the footage speak for itself. The audio in Splinter Cell is simple and complicated. By that I mean the sounds heard are simple, limited variation in gunfire. Every light makes the same sound when shot, regardless of bulb type, and most of the nameless bad guys have the same few lines read by the same 3 people. On the complicated side, sound is important and directional. Soldiers will react to a sound made in a particular area, whether that be from a gunshot, a thrown bottle, or Sam Fisher stepping on broken glass. There is a sound threshold in the game. If your character moves on certain surfaces or through plants, guards can hear that. If there's a thunderstorm or other distracting sounds, such as a loud soccer game on a television, Sam's movements will remain undetected. The controls are, to say the least, a tad bit complicated. As way of a disclaimer, this footage was captured on the PC version of the game, and I imagine the controller on the Xbox or PlayStation would be somewhat more fluid. Not perfect, but perhaps better. This isn't your standard first-person shooter type of control scheme. Everything is very purposeful, and because of that, things sometimes take a span of time to occur. Weapon changes take multiple selections, and this was before the advent of a selection wheel you see in every game these days. They do interfere with the flow of the game, as you will stop, mess with the menu to pull up a gun, and then continue on. As for the general difficulty of Splinter Cell, the main thing is the mission failed message, which will likely pop up on your screen more than once. Certain missions have certain rules that are extremely strict. These include not killing civilians, not being detected, and not allowing alarms to be triggered via suspicious guards, knocked out guards being found, cameras, etc., and leaving no trace whatsoever of your passing. Other times the difficulty is in the sheer number of combatants that can rush at you when you are actually detected, often with much more powerful weapons than your own. Sam's stealth suit does have Kevlar, but Kevlar alone won't stop a 7.62 round out of an AK-47. It doesn't take much to drop you. Again, this is due to the game design. The purpose is to not be detected. Later installments in the franchise became much more lenient towards players who prefer a more first-person shooter style. I'm looking at you, Blacklist. But this first game is hardcore stealth. You can get away with some full assault in certain situations, but it is by no means a cure-all, and will likely make the rest of the mission much more difficult. Now, as we dive into the lore and story of the game, it should be noted that the lore of the game as an individual entity is limited. But seeing as Splinter Cell is set within the universe of Tom Clancy's creation, the lore behind Splinter Cell is massive as it spans many novels and games that aren't directly related to Splinter Cell. For example, during the events of the Amazon show Jack Ryan, Sam Fisher and Third Echelon could technically be running around doing their style of work, as Jack Ryan was president at one point in the Splinter Cell timeline. And as we know, Sam Fisher does show up in Ghost Recon, the same way Ghost Recon and Hawks had tie-ins in the past. Due to the scale of the lore in this scenario, let's just move on to the story of this individual game. We start with training, as all games do, as a way of a tutorial. You have to run a gauntlet of obstacles to show you the controls for various game mechanics involved throughout, a secret agent boot camp, if you will. You're Sam Fisher, a Navy covert ops veteran who was recruited to Third Echelon, a division of the National Security Agency, to investigate missing agents from another government agency. Like almost all games, the Russians play a huge part, and it's mostly a negative part. I don't want to tell you much because I like to avoid spoilers, but it boils down to uncovering a plot that involves a nuclear missile. On a grander scale, the story is very engaging. A lot of information is provided in-game via Grimm's daughter and Lambert, and it makes the story thrive. As for multiplayer, well, there is none. Multiplayer didn't make its way into this franchise until the second installment, Pandora Tomorrow. This isn't a bad thing. The game itself holds enough appeal without multiplayer to be enjoyable, and we have to keep in mind that in 2002, multiplayer was still very limited in its capabilities for this type of game. Even Pandora Tomorrow's multiplayer was a basic 4v4 stealth versus assault setup that was actually fairly boring. If you want co-op, look into Splinter Cell Chaos Theory, as the co-op in that game is fantastic, with nearly as many missions as the single-player campaign. Splinter Cell is fantastic. The story is enthralling, the characters are intriguing and real, the gameplay is on point, and the graphics are old. Better graphics would have been nice, and an HD version for something other than the PlayStation 3 would have been nice, but graphics don't make a game. Story and enjoyability make a game, and Splinter Cell has it in surplus. Now, for the hard part. I love this game, I adore this franchise, and I absolutely recommend people play it or revisit it. But if you are someone like I mentioned in that review earlier, a person that doesn't enjoy stealth-oriented games, this game isn't for you. That's the sad truth of it, it's a niche market. It's not a first-person shooter, it's not a fast-paced action, and it's not an adventure. It's a challenge. But if you do enjoy stealth, there is no better stealth game than Splinter Cell and its sequels. There's so much going for it. As for my score, I gave this game a solid 8 out of 10 for the simple facts that the graphics are sad, player movement is sometimes depressing, and the controls are not intuitive. With that, we're done. Next week, I think I will showcase a first-person shooter. Possibly not the first of the franchise, but one that redefined a franchise. We'll see. And as always, I ask you consider liking the video and subscribing to my channel. Beyond that, I stream every Saturday around 7 p.m. Central Time and randomly throughout the week. Stop in, say hi, hang out. We can maybe play a game together. With that, hope to see you next time and take care.